The founding fathers of America were very concerned about the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. This was not a new concern, for even in the early first century, Christians were persecuted for speaking about Jesus Christ. In Acts chapter 5, Peter and other Christians were imprisoned, beaten, and commanded not to preach about Jesus Christ. In verse 29 it says, "Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, 'We ought to obey God rather than men.'" While Peter and the other apostles were law-abiding citizens, they had a higher obedience to God. Even though men told them to be silent about Jesus Christ, God had given them the command to preach Jesus Christ. Even today, we ought to obey the law of the land unless it is contrary to the law of God. In our hearts, we ought to obey God first and man second. Ideally, men will never create laws that are contrary to God's laws, but when that happens, and it does, we ought to obey God rather than men.